Welcome to the Conscious Combat Club, trauma-informed martial arts by women for women. I'm your host Georgia, and I cannot wait to go on this journey with you. Please note that some listeners might find this content distressing. Take care, connect with your support networks, and refer to the organisations in the show notes below. This is our 5th episode of Fight Science, a special segment of the Conscious Combat Club podcast where we invite researchers to take a deep dive into a paper they've written and explain it to us as though we're 14 years old. In this episode, I interview Wolf Mehling, a researcher from the US who explores the psychosomatics of pain and bodily awareness, aka interoception, and how our relationship to our body affects our health and well-being. In this episode, we explore the paper titled "A 12-Week Integrative Exercise Program Improves Self-Reported Mindfulness and Interoceptive Awareness in War Veterans with Posttraumatic Stress Symptoms." Beautiful. So, Wolf, the paper we're talking about today is titled "A 12-Week Integrative Exercise Program Improves Self-Reported Mindfulness and Interoceptive Awareness in War Veterans with Posttraumatic Stress Symptoms." So, if we take a moment to imagine we're explaining this paper to a 14-year-old, how would you explain this paper?
Okay, so we did a study with war veterans, which are people who had experienced US Americans, women or men who had experienced war situations.
Mm-hmm.
And they have been diagnosed very formally by a psychiatrist with what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. So they have all trauma experiences. Some women have, in addition to war trauma, they also have sexual trauma. They've been abused or attempted abuse or something. And those trauma means it's a dramatic experience that they can't forget, and it comes up at night, and it gives them some distress and has kind of entered their identities. So they are identified as being people who have been traumatized. And so they often can sleep very well. They are restless. They have a hard time connecting with their body usually. So part of PTSD is what's called dissociation, which is a kind of that they don't feel their body, they're not familiar with their body, they think a lot and they ruminate, so they have circulating thoughts about themselves and about the rest of the world, and often don't really connect to physical sensations, how they feel. So it's called dissociation or disembodiment.
And those are the subjects. And then what happened in the study? What did you do?
Oh yeah, what's happened in the study? So at this study was before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all in person. Participants came to the YMCA, which is big. It's kind of the flagship of San Francisco's YMCA. It's a big place. And there's a room reserved for the veterans to come to that activity. And they meet there 3 times a week for an hour, where they do follow an instructor who does exercises with them.
Mm-hmm.
And these exercises are taught by fitness instructors, so the usual fitness people who do kind of strength training and stretches, particularly strength training and some aerobics, so running and jumping jack to get kind of your heart rate up. And these exercises are provided not just for exercise effects like strength and aerobics, but also for them to feel their body. So the idea is that if you can do exercises in a way where you just think about, oh, I want to accomplish 50 knee bends or something. I want to push 50 pounds or something. So if you have achievement goals, that's kind of discouraged. Instead, what we like to do is that we we frame the exercises with mindfulness attitudes. So we have, in the normal mindfulness training, like mindfulness-based stress reduction, is a program that has been delivered since the late 70s in medical centers pretty much all over the world, including Australia. Uh, they have an 8-week program where they have for every week, they have a certain topic that they teach in addition to practicing mindfulness. And that these topics we took into this program. For example, one topic, and bring those topics, we frame them as passwords. Like in the military, you have, if you want to come from behind from the bushes and your unit doesn't know who you are, you have to have a password. So we call them passwords, and then for example, one password would be new beginning, which is one of the mindfulness ideas that every time is a new moment. So you you practice something now. Whatever you done last week or 3 days ago, how well you did or how poor you did doesn't count. It's just for today, it's for right now. So it's present moment awareness is another topic. Non-judgmental. So you shouldn't compare yourself to your own achievements from the last time, or what you would like to be like, or to another exercise person next to you, or to your trainer. Like in yoga, the problem always is that the yoga teachers are so hypermobile, and then they can do contortions, and participants, I can't do that, and then they feel bad. So that's one of the rules. You don't compare yourself to anybody else, ideally. And so these 8 passwords, every session is one of them. No, every week. So for 3 sessions, it's one password. The whole program, if I remember correctly, was 12 weeks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there some come repeatedly, and this was kind of a rolling enrollment, how we call it. So people could start anytime. There's no first class and last class. All classes keep going all the time, and then when new participants come, they just come in. So the main thing is that we have a kind of a rhythm in the class. So it starts very slow, warm up. And first we have the password, where the instructor explains a little bit what this password means to the instructor, what we want them to know, and what they might associate it with. And then after a few words, it takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe there's a new participant that gets introduced. And then they start a slow warm up, mostly aerobic stuff. And then it's their stretching, there's myofascial release. So there's some rolling on rollers with kind of painful areas is to relax on them. And then it has all kinds of physical exercises, but could also be yoga moves. So all the exercise instructors have background in yoga, and um, at the end we have a cool down, and then we pretty much have laying on the floor kind of yoga, the dead pose. It's called, dead man pose, or forgot the Sanskrit name, Swasayana or whatever, something like that.
Shavasana, yes.
Yeah, and and um, some sessions come at least at that time. Yeah, we have another study that came afterwards, but at that time we also had music in there, and this was pretty much at the discretion of the instructor with feedback, from participants if they don't like it or so. It shouldn't be. And then the music also fit with the exercise. So there's like aerobics is kind of rhythmic, and then calming down is kind of meditative music. So there's an element of meditative thing in there. But the main thing is that the exercises serve the purpose of people sensing their body. So there was always a reminder during the exercises. How does it feel? The stretch that you just did. Where do you feel it? What's the location of the stretch? And yeah, so it was all kind of, the idea was get people out of their circular thinking into
Mhm.
sensing their body, at least for that hour.
Yes, I
That should
love
be.
it.
Mhm.
What is the difference between mindfulness and interoception? I know you measured for both within
Yeah,
the study.
they're two different. They
Quite a bit
overlap.
of
Yeah. So mindfulness can be to the inside of your body and can be to the outside. For example, are you aware of the warmth? Yeah, but that could be inside. But the air, the wind, for example, in your hair, it's kind of outside. Are you aware of uh, the beauty around you? That can all be mindful. When you're walking somewhere, are you really seeing the stuff around you, or are you just in your thinking? So the mindfulness itself as a general term doesn't distinguish between exteroception, all the five senses to the outside, like you're drinking a coffee. Is that Pete's coffee? Is it Starbucks? Can you distinguish that? No. Is it a good coffee? Do you like the coffee? Um, yeah, all these, so tasting, hearing, sensing outside, like the five senses to the outside, or interoception doesn't distinguish. Mindfulness has both. And interoception doesn't have to be mindful. For example, if you have an anxiety disorder and you notice that how fast your heart is beating, that makes your perception worse. And often people get kind of a hypervigilant type of awareness. That's not a mindful awareness, but it's also interoception. So interoception doesn't have to be mindful, and mindfulness doesn't have to be interoceptive. So mindful includes exter and interoception, and interoception includes mindful interoception, or, for example, anxiety-induced interoception, like, oh my God, uh, something is happening in my belly, something is going on there, something is not right, maybe I have to throw up. That's not mindful, not calming down, you're kind of getting into panic, or so doesn't have to be mindful interoception. That's actually one of the points. In the old days, like 10 years ago, or, yeah, more than 10 years ago, one of the most used questionnaires for interoception was a questionnaire that had lots of symptoms that are anxiety related.
Mhm.
Do you sometimes have cold feet? Do you feel your heart beating too fast? Do you get dry mouth? All these are kind of anxiety associated symptoms, and then they added those up, and then they're surprised that this correlates with anxiety. We try to distinguish between interoception, awareness of the inside of your body, as beneficial or as maladaptive. Beneficial means it's good for you to feel, for example, yeah, there's something going on here. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I should eat something. Or maybe I'm too cold and I should put a sweater on. These are all useful cues or sensations from your body that direct you to a behavioral adaptation. But if you have um, just hypervigilance, oh my God, maybe something is wrong with me, or there could be uh, when I have cold feet, maybe I have a disease that doesn't get the blood to my feet, rather than maybe I'm just anxious or have a stomach symptom, and maybe that's something cancer rather than thinking, oh, maybe I should eat something. So there is a hypervigilance can be maladaptive versus mindful interoception is more adaptive, so beneficial.
Mhm. So it's kind of like whether or not you're being curious about the sensations, because you could say, you know, for some of us at certain points, you're going to feel your heart beating really fast. I'll use a martial arts example. Let's say you're about to step out to a competition. I hope your heartbeat will increase in speed because you're preparing to do high
Okay.
intensity exercise
Yes.
and your body is
Yes.
preparing itself for combat. And you can feel that and choose to say, oh God, I'm going to have a panic attack on the mat. I'm going to look so stupid. Everyone's going to think I'm a failure and
Right.
I'm going to lose. Or it can
Yeah.
be, oh, this is interesting feeling that I'm feeling. Maybe I'm excited to go out and compete. Maybe this is
Yeah.
my body's way of going to help me be able to execute high intensity exercise for the next
Yes.
5 minutes or however long the bout's going to be. And that is the difference, even though it's the same internal sensations.
Yeah. I totally agree. So what you described is a mindful way of curious attention to the sensation with curiosity, which includes that you're not overwhelmed by it and
Mhm,
totally identified with the sensation, but you have a certain distance. It's not that you don't feel fully and fully present the sensation, but you have kind of the capacity to decenter, they call it, or be aware of your awareness. You're aware that you're have these feelings. And then you can say, okay, yeah, exciting or anxiety, it's the same physiologically. It's pretty much the same.
And if we think about then interoception and mindfulness, there's one more term that comes up in some of the literature that I read, especially around martial arts, which is embodiment. And I didn't put this in our notes, so we can skip this question. But how does embodiment fit into interoception, mindfulness, embodiment?
Yeah. So I view embodiment, you can see that as a state or as a process.
Mhm,
So, for example, if you start exercise and you are in the present moment with the perception of the exercises of and what's how that feels in your body, you embody yourself from maybe sitting on the computer and being with your attention in the screen.
mhm,
So you want to, like, when we talk with each other, can I feel what where are my feet on the floor, and um, am I comfortable, or am I totally neglecting myself and only listen to your questions and try to get the best answer? So
mhm,
am I still comfortable with your? Yeah, I'm comfortable with your questions, and I can answer them from my memory and my thoughts, and I feel easy. But that's embodiment, kind of. You can see that as a process that you. So my daughter, for example, is a psychotherapist. She calls her work embodiment therapy.
mhm,
That she tries to get people out of the rumination, thinking mind and judgment and all the thoughts you have about yourself into sensing yourself, sensing rather than thinking. So embodiment is can be a switching as a process, switching from thinking about everything. Like you can think about your arm, how it moves, or you can be in your arm and feel it. There's a very interesting guy in Australia. His name is, you might have heard him, Lorimer Mosley.
yes.
He did a study that blew my mind where he had people giving kind of this mirror box or some trick where you have a rubber hand on your table and the real hand under the table. One other hand is on the table, one hand is under the table, and then there's a visual illusion that you have both hands on the table, and then they can do all kinds of stuff since with the brush doing this, and then do you feel that on your hand or not? So the rubber hand illusion, it's called, this experiment, works best with people who don't feel their body, and it doesn't work very well for people who are really mindful in their body. And the other thing is, the more you are in the rubber hand with your presence rather than in your real hand, the more sinks the temperature in your real hand. So your hand gets cold if you're not in there. And it's an example of embodiment. If you disown your real hand and embody yourself in a fake hand, then your real hand suffers. It gets less blood supply, you feel less, you get separated from it. So that's embodiment, would be that you don't forget your real hand when you look at the plastic hand.
So, embodiment is a persistent, constant state of interoception.
It's kind of, yeah, we could call it presence in your body. You being there. So presence is a funny term because it got kind of, in the research world, it got popular with the virtual reality stuff.
Mm.
So being there is how they define presence. So if you're really in your real hand, that's embodied. If you are present in your fake hand, then you're disembodied.
Mm-hmm.
But you're embodied, maybe you can say that, in something illusionary. So embodiment means pretty much present mind, yeah, not necessarily, but usually you're mindful. You're present with your attention, with your perception in, I would hope, in your own body, but you can also be in an avatar or something.
Mm-hmm.
So they call that also embodiment, I think, in the virtual reality. So it like people have chronic pain, and then they have a virtual reality application where you try to be swimming with dolphins, in water. So you perceive yourself in an avatar,
Mm-hmm.
and you embody yourself there. That's how they call it.
Mm.
I hate that terminology, and I don't like that they use the same term presence in that way, but I can't stop them talking the way they talk. So
Yeah,
the
that feels
term
more like
presence and
captivated.
the term presence and embodiment can be used for fake reality, and it just means you sense into this. You said persistent. Yeah, I think it's over time. I think that's right.
Yeah, and I mean, when we think about martial arts, when we think about how engaging in sports that are very deliberate across all of the martial arts, I think especially the soft martial arts, so like Tai Chi, Wing
Mm.
Chun, Karate types, where there's a lot of time spent solo as opposed to working with a partner or a pad. There's a lot of space to sink into your body, feel where your weight is positioned, and so on. But I think even across the hard martial arts, so kickboxing, boxing, jiu-jitsu styles where we're trying to exact force external to our bodies, still have a huge degree of practicing embodiment, because you start to learn where your body is and where you need it to be, and also where somebody else's body is relative to
Yeah,
your body then.
yeah.
I'm still not sure how I place in the context of embodiment this like sense of where another person's body is, but you really can't sense another body without feeling it on you. So
Yeah.
I feel a certain amount of weight of somebody else on me, and then I know I can throw that person once I'm carrying that amount of weight. And whether that's embodiment or something else, I'm still not sure.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So it's like when somebody tries to lift you, how gravity works through your
Mhm.
body into the ground, and how you feel your feet on the ground, how you feel your center of gravity. You know, I think they call it hara,
Mm-hmm.
in your in the fighting traditions. And there's a sense of centeredness, and that sense of centeredness is in the body. It's not somewhere out there, and it's not in your mind. It's not you have to focus with your mind onto that center to be able to perceive it. And then over years of practice, you get very easy with that. The beginner has a problem, they think too much about it. They can't really get in there that easily. Yeah, so
Yes.
that's all embodiment, yeah. And then with another person, you just pull, push, right? This is one of the Tai Chi things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, yeah, and there you learn kind of a lightness in the movements and ease, and you perceive oncoming energy and how you can make that this person falls and you don't get it. So there's a lot of uh, sensory perception about strength, about energy of the other person. Yeah, but you have to feel it in your body somehow. Yeah, I think so. It's not a visual thing, right? If it would be visual, you would have you need some processing time here in the brain that the good fighter doesn't do. That just happens kind of intuitively or automatically, or
Mm-hmm.
just a faster translation from perception to action.
Yeah, which is embodied.
Yeah.
So if we come back to the study, these war veterans diagnosed with PTSD, they did 12 weeks of this mindful exercise program. What were some of the outcomes that you observed or measured?
Yeah, so they did show a decrease in PTSD symptom scores. So there is kind of in the psychiatry world and research world for psychiatry, there's a gold standard assessment. It's an interview-based assessment of severity of PTSD. I have never done these interviews. That's what the psychiatrists do. It's a long interview, takes probably half an hour or something like that. I'm not totally sure about the length. And then they have all kinds of little marks in this interview where they kind of add up some points, and then they get a score, and they have to reach a certain score on different dimensions to be diagnosed as PTSD. And what you want to have, there's a certain cutoff points, above that score, you have PTSD. Below that score, there's probably a kind of a gray zone, but at some point you say, okay, below that zone, you are recovered from PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
So you check how many people are recovered. So there should be some people who get significantly, clinically, meaningfully better. And it happened. So there were improvements in mean over the whole group in the amount of PTSD. And then that was the main outcome. How's PTSD? So it's a psychiatric assessment that they do with long interviews, and that kind of gold standard of psychiatric assessment showed improvement at the mean across the whole study compared to a wait list. So you could see a wait list and see if that changes over the same 12 weeks or not. And then we asked ourselves, what, so there's a science question then, okay, it got better. By what way did it get better? What's the mechanism?
Mm-hmm.
Then we try to do kind of the other secondary outcomes, like mindfulness or interoceptive awareness. Does that also change in the same time? And then you can do so that did change. So you have in the same time in the group that was getting the intervention compared to the control group that didn't get the intervention, does it really change? Yes, mindfulness improved and body awareness or interoceptive awareness improved. The third question then after this is shown would be, does one mediate the other? So does a change in interoceptive awareness mediate over the 12 weeks the change in the symptoms of PTSD? That's another, it's not the same question as is that happens at the same time. So you have to see then in each participant, what are these changes in a way related that you can say, okay, when you change body awareness or interoceptive awareness with this intervention, that leads to a change in PTSD symptomatics. That statistics is kind of sophisticated and requires higher sample size, higher size. And we couldn't prove that. So that didn't show clear enough. No, couldn't show that.
If you did have a bigger sample size, would it be things like, because I know there are 31 things, I think, on the interoceptive awareness tool, something like that. And would it be
Yeah,
that you pick certain or look at certain things and say, okay, like this person improved in this area and that relates to this area of the scale for
yeah,
PTSD. So it might be this person was very dissociative
yeah,
previously, now they're reduced, and that relates to interoception. Is that like the mediating factors?
yeah, exactly. So you have the measure we use for interoceptive awareness is a questionnaire that has 8 scales. And the scale that was what we speculated and what we could show is that self-regulation changes. And there was another scale. I don't remember exactly which scale changed, and maybe attention regulation or something. So there's sub dimensions of interoceptive awareness that we assessed. I don't have the study in front of me, but there. I remember self-regulation was one of the things that I expected to change, and it did change.
Which is, for those who don't know, self-regulation, is that regulating the sensations of the body or regulating emotions or?
Yeah, it's regulation. So when you have something, a negative a sensation that you usually interpret as negative, like pain or stress symptoms, like anxiety, a kind of increased heart rate and stuff, then if you feel those sensations, feel those emotions, can you calm yourself down by breathing and focusing on your body? Right? Like sitting, okay, I have to sit down and focus on my body and see it. How is that really? What's really happening in my body right now? What's the truth? And if you are able to focus on your body sensations with this, what you described, mindful, slightly decentered or detached or curious attitude, and that if you recognize that this can calm your emotional and your arousal, like the arousal, then this is self-regulation. So
Is that
pretty much
something that they
arousal.
practice? Oh, sorry, go on.
It's pretty much self-regulation of arousal. So like getting excited about a fight,
Yes.
you're going to have very different levels of excitement before that. Depends on your self-confidence, depends on your years of experience, depends on your embodiment. And then when you focus on these sensations that we call maybe anxiety as a reflex, stage fright, right? And say, okay, no, maybe this sensation is not that bad. It could be also just my excitement, and I don't know. I wanna be good at this, and I'm I'm kind of speeding up my awareness. I can react faster if I have a little more arousal. So if you have that attitude, then it's more self-regulation.
Is that something that they deliberately practiced throughout the program, as in feeling their heart rate go up and then deliberately bringing it back down using
No,
exercise?
no,
What do
no,
you
there was
think
not.
about that?
Yeah, you could do that. You could um, watch when you're resting how your heart rate that you on purpose brought up with aerobics, how that calms down and how that feels good. Savor the good sensation that come with it. You can do that. Mhm.
I say that. So I guess a leading question. That's one of the things that we do in our martial arts programs. We call fondly pound and ground. So in mixed martial arts, there's an area of combat which is called ground and pound. We flip
Pound,
that
pound,
ground and pound. So ground and pound is in
ground.
mixed martial arts when one opponent is downed and the other person is striking them from like on the floor. And we do pound and ground, which is where we invite our heart to pound, either using, jumping jacks, running on the spot, or oftentimes shadow boxing. And then we'll do a period of practicing grounding. And that might be interoceptive grounding, as in a body scan, or it might be more mindfulness or exteroceptive, as in let's look around the room and look for all the color green that we can see, to practice feeling what it's like in our bodies to have the heart rate come up and then bring it back down, both so that we get repetitions and it's more likely outside of class that's going to be achievable for us to do when somebody upsets us or something happens that upsets us.
Yeah,
But also because then we have proof. And it's hard for us to tell our brains that I am a person who's capable of calming myself if I don't have a model. So then, clients will say, I know I can do it because I've done it before. So I was interested
yeah.
how what you might think about that. We haven't studied it
No,
yet, but I would like to.
it sounds good. It sounds good. So yeah, it's kind of to read. So uh, because the word we use is you by practicing dealing with this upset in the physical sensation way, you kind of take away the threat value of those. They
Yeah.
become challenges but not threats. So they're these sensations, and yeah, absolutely, it's a good idea.
Well, thank you. Coming back to the study, one of the other things that improved was positive mood states. Do you think that was because of exercise, or was that due to the mindfulness component, bit of column A, bit of column B? What do you think led to the participants having improved positive, or what did they say? Positive mood states, I think it's what it says.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. We don't know why. It
Mm,
could be one element in the class was the social coming together.
mhm,
So there's a social element, group element, and the others. They all have PTSD. They all have uh, something. They all have war experience. They can. You can talk with the other person. For example, the YMCA in the winter was at times when it was dark outside,
mm,
which is for women more than men was a challenge then to go back to their car
mhm.
and kind of, oh my God, this is kind of scary. So the the threat value of that was kind of there. And then, but they go as two of them to the car, it's easier. And you can talk about it. I don't really, I feel bad if I go to the car in the dark. You can share this with somebody else that takes your feeling bad about it away. So there's a social element. Then, of course, physical exercise has a endorphin effect. So there's hormones that come into the brain and into the spinal cord, and they decrease pain. They feel good. So they feel it's a feel good, and just getting out of your head. If you are one of these people who ruminate a lot,
Mm.
feeling all these negative stuff all the time, and the glass is always half empty, and you have you identify as I might never get better and stuff like that. And just to get out of these thoughts into sensing, that yeah, my body functions, I'm still alive, I can go through the whole class, uh, and I'm now, this is like my fourth week, and I feel I have changed with the exercises, I can do 10 push-ups rather than two or something, right? So there's a difference. And that's all that makes good mood, of course. There's some sense of accomplishment, a sense of self-efficacy, that you're capable of doing stuff. I'm not, we didn't, um, we don't know full exactly but it's probably all this stuff together
Yeah.
that makes good mood.
And if other people were to take or read this study, or other people in the exercise space were to take anything away from this, do you have any recommendations for, like, are there key takeaways for, let's say, martial arts coaches, which is a strong percentage of the people listening to this podcast? Are there any things that they can learn from this study?
Yeah, I would say that uh, something is happen anyway. A lot of exercise instructors are also yoga teachers.
Hmm.
Lots of yoga teachers learn that aerobics is something they should do in addition to their postural movement awareness things. And that exercise just in a competitive way might not bring the benefits that it can bring when you are using it in a mindful way rather than competitive. So there, for the psychology, your mood states, your sense of well-being, the integration of sensing and moving together, sensing your body while you're moving and trying to find subtle sensations, you're just smarter in your life when you have that. And I think that's something, yeah. So they did, for example, in China, they did fitness elite athletes. They compared elite athletes with normal people who were running around the court, just to have some exercise. They noticed that elite athletes, if they are in the elite, they are somewhat more aware of their body, using the
Hmm.
same questionnaire we used in our study. And athletes um, that start from scratch and do exercise regularly increase their body awareness. So they learn this body awareness. It's one of the side effects of exercise is that you become more aware of your body. It's like, if you only do the body exercises for how it looks, like we had an exercise instructor who I've seen pictures from 20 years earlier, totally buffed up, with hormone taking and one of these Arnold Schwarzenegger type guys, ugly in my view. He had totally changed. He got into a yoga. He is a fitness instructor, so totally into fitness. He got into yoga. Now he's a lean yoga guy. Looks beautiful. He's also a gay man, so he looks really much more attractive in my views. Uh, so if you just but he's not doing it for how it looks. He's doing it how it feels.
Mm.
So if you do the exercise, whatever, like for example, I don't like ballet for girls because it should look good to the audience.
Mm.
they don't learn to do movements feeling it from the inside, that you enjoy the dance movements. It's not even tango could be more for show than for how it feels. So if movement practices should be done to help you be embodied, being in your body, feeling your body, enjoying your body. It shouldn't be for the looks.
I think that there's something so profound as well too in that lack of competitiveness, both with yourself and with other people. As I think there are so many well-meaning fitness instructors and coaches who will say, like we all work hard, or like keep pushing past, or like this person's not giving up, so you don't give up, or if one person gives up, the
Right.
whole group's going to be punished. I despise all of these things, but I think it's really great when we can say it's not just us being sensitive. It is actually more effective if you step
Yes.
away from that style of training and
Yes.
empower people to take
Mhm.
from the practice what they want to and to be in their bodies rather than to be competing with their bodies.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree.
Now, couple of final questions. I think this study was predominantly men, few women. Are there any training recommendations that you have for somebody who's working with a group of all women versus all men, or do you think that these concepts of interoception and mindfulness are ungendered?
Yeah. I mean, there is a slight difference probably um, when it's about um, sexuality. If you're very so for example, we had female exercise instructors that
Mm,
automatically some of the participants fell in love with,
hmm.
kind of went after them, which wasn't appropriate, of course.
Of course.
But for female, I would say there is a like but you talked somewhere or you asked me like, is it trauma? Is this approach trauma sensitive? So there's a different sensitivity for trauma possibly in women
Yeah.
if they are just among themselves, and if it's not like particularly some aggressive lesbian scene around it. If it's just women among themselves, then they can feel safer
Hmm.
than with men together. And there is an issue. So we had sometimes when the groups were mixed, sometimes women didn't feel that easy or that safe uh,
Hmm.
with mixed with men. If there's trauma background, there might be additional sensitivity that has to be in the mind of the instructor. And
Hmm.
so, for example, we had certain rules. You don't touch a person without asking for permission, and
Hmm.
you never come from behind to a person that you're touching, and you allow their situation in the room in relation to the exit door the way they want to.
Hmm.
And there's some people that just are very aware of where's the door. And can I get out of the room without having to explain too much? These are all easy stuff that we can say it in ahead of time.
Mm.
If you feel uncomfortable with anything, just go, right? And you can tell me later on personal email or something. So all these, so there's a, we did with the exercise instructors some, mm, um, how you call it, PTSD awareness
Hmm.
training,
Yeah.
so trauma awareness training.
Absolutely. And yeah, that comes back to, I think, a question that I had down that I haven't had a chance to ask yet was about the integration of yoga. And I suppose meditation practices more broadly, where there's a lot of stillness. One thing that I notice with some people is that can create an amount of space where the rumination can flood in, or a lot of the thoughts of I'm not good enough can flood in comparison to we're doing more like aerobic exercise, or there's a lot of movement happening where there's just almost more stimulus for the body, and sometimes that can feel safer for some
Mhm.
people. So that's what I was curious about within the yoga practice. You mentioned some of the trauma sensitive practices like choice and having, awareness of exits, being able to come and go
Sense
whenever
of
they like.
control. Yeah,
Yes.
you stay in charge of yourself, so you don't do what other people say you should do. You do what feels right for you. Yeah. Yeah, that quiet period, like when you lay down at the end, we had very a big variety of responses to, do we want more yoga? Do we want less yoga? Um, it varies, and
Yeah.
I don't think there's a gender specificity for that. Maybe there's more white men who don't like the yoga. Um, but we were expecting, in the VA population, veterans population, like, you know, soldiers, ex-soldiers, military personnel,
Mm,
that they might poo-poo all the mindfulness stuff and the no, that it's not that they don't do that anymore. I think this is like 20 years ago, probably more than now.
mm,
There's actually some military training, for example, for shooting, where they have to be aware of their breath. You
mm,
don't inhale while you're pulling the trigger.
mm-hmm,
Wait for the exhale, you have a short pause, and then you shoot. So there's an that awareness of breathing and where you are in the rhythm of breathing. It's like you do certain movements, pushing movements, better with exhalation than with inhalation. So these things are coming into the military training now. So they're not objecting to yoga anymore, and we've had lots. We were pretty welcomed with these things, and there's a few people who say, "Oh, this yoga stuff and this mindfulness, they're just talking. Let's do exercise." Yeah,
mm-hmm.
those people,
Yeah.
but it's getting much more acceptable, at least here in California.
Mm,
And
yeah.
actually, we had a study online where it's all over the nation,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, there's more acceptance for yoga and mindfulness now than there is. You can always say this fitness for body and mind,
Mm,
and the fitness of the mind has a association with the fitness of the body, so they go together somehow. That's what we tell them.
which we love. It's awesome. I think it's awesome. My
Yeah,
final question is about the tool that you developed, which we should point out to everyone that the scale that you were using to assess interoceptive awareness was a scale that you developed.
mhm,
And it is an excellent tool that if you Google it, the first or second thing that pops up will be a list of all the papers that have used it, or a lot of papers that have used it, and the
mm.
versions of it, and it's very easy to implement. So do you have any recommendations for particularly martial arts coaches that might be curious to work with a group of students or see if there's any change in interoception with their
Yeah.
students?
So you could see that this is it's called multi-dimensional, meaning we don't call it subscales, we actually call it 8 different scales. They
Mm-hmm.
are together interoceptive awareness. And they might change in differential ways, and sometimes it's a combination of two scales that are interesting. So if you want to propose to be used in the practical environment, not so much for research, but for assessment of participation and how they do with it, and maybe as a teaching tool, you can choose which of the 8 scales are in your eyes the most important, because it's long, it's 37 items now. It was
Mm,
32, and then for psychometric purposes, for the science of it, we had to make it a little longer, which nobody likes, of course. But you can look at what you think in your conceptualization what what would you want them to not to realize, or what do you want them to notice changes in? And then you don't have to use it all together. So you can choose, let's say, self-regulation, emotional awareness, and trusting, for example. These are just 3 scales. Noticing is probably not that interesting, the first scale. Sometimes in people with pain, it's important, that they don't worry about symptoms, or that they don't distract themselves. So, whatever you think, when you're doing classes as an instructor, and you want them to help seeing changes from before to after, yeah, you choose the scales you like.
That's really helpful. That's a really helpful piece of advice. Thank you. And I genuinely feel like I could talk to you about all of this for another hour, but we're just about out of time. So,
Yeah.
Wolf, if people do want to contact you about your studies, is there any best way to go about doing that, through the university or differently?
Your email, it's on the questionnaire. There's the email. Just my name, wolf.mehling@ucsf.edu.
Perfect. We love it. We'll put all those details in the show notes. And thank you again for coming on. This has been a really insightful conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad my work can be useful. That's one of the best things you can experience.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of the club. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch, please refer to the information in the show notes. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider leaving us a review or subscribing on whichever platforms you use to listen or watch the podcast. The Conscious Combat Club acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands in which we work, live and play. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. We'd like to say thank you to Nari for the beautiful song Shape Me, heard at the beginning and end of every episode. If you'd like to connect with Nari, you can find her on Instagram at Nari the Saga.
Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight up off his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well. Take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well. Now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny for my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it or record it, huh?